And he's actually not here in the country, so I can use his name. And plus he's one of my best friends, and I'm going to post this on the internet and then send him the link. My friend's name is Father Carl Subler. And Father Carl Subler is a priest of this diocese. He is a friend of mine, one of my best friends, and he is also serving in the military as a chaplain in Iraq. Now, Father Subler is kind of an adventurer, that is to say the least. He has a Harley, which he rides on a regular basis when he's here in the States. He loves to jump out of airplanes. And finally, he is a pilot. He's a pilot of small engine aircraft. So the guy, Father Subler, loves adventure. He loves it by air, by sea, by sky, and apparently by desert, as I hear as he's in Iraq. So pray for him. If you knew him, you'd understand. He was the associate at Newark, and while he was in Newark, Ohio, as the associate at St. Francis, he invited me out to go for an airplane ride. And so I said, I don't trust you to drive a car. Why would I trust you to fly me around in an airplane? He said, come on, Wags, it'll be fun. Turns out he just wanted an extra $40 to help him pay for the cost of gas, but I was very happy to go up in the airplane with him. And we took off and we taxied and we went into the sky, and there we were, and he looks over at me as we're in the sky, and this is what he says to me. He says, Josh, I said, Carl, and he says, if something goes wrong, you absolve me and I absolve you. And I looked at him and I said, you go first. So we're sitting there in his little airplane, in this airplane of a friend of his in the parish. And there we are, and we're flying all around, the eastern part of Columbus and Licking County and down toward Hocking County and things like that. And it was beautiful. I never get a chance to fly in an airplane like that. When you fly in the big airplanes, you can't see anything. And we're flying around, and he says to me at one point, he says, would you like to take the controls? And I said, absolutely not. I said, I don't trust you to fly this airplane. How am I supposed to trust me? And he said, just try it. He said, put your hands on the controls. And I put my hands on the controls. He said, see, it's not too bad. And he said, I'm going to let go. And I said, don't let go. And he let go. And I felt my whole body tense up as I took control of the airplane. Because while I was a passenger there, I didn't really feel what was going on. But as I was taking control of the stick for just the 20 seconds, it seemed like an eternity, I felt the gravity pulling the airplane down. I felt the wind pushing the airplane to one side. I felt the propeller pushing us to the other. And it was amazing, all the forces that were acting upon the airplane. I felt the lift underneath the wings, keeping it in the air and keeping us alive. I felt all these different forces working on the airplane, and it actually made me tense up because every single muscle in my body just sort of went like this as I was trying just to keep the airplane in the air. After about 20 seconds, he took the stick back and he began to fly again, and he said, would you like to do it again? I said, absolutely not. It was absolutely tiring. That 20 seconds that I held the stick, the controls, were some of the most tiring 20 seconds I've ever had in my life, just because it was so physically challenging, so much more than I had ever expected. And it allowed me, as we were sort of flying there, and I was praying a lot during that trip, for whatever reason, as Father Subler and I were flying around, it made me realize that we are exactly in the same position. This is what St. Paul talks about in the second reading. See, St. Paul has this desire to go to heaven, to be, we all have this concept of being in the sky with Jesus, and that's okay. But being pulled back toward the earth. You see, this is where each and every one of us is. Each and every one of us who is baptized, each and every one of us that receives the Eucharist, each and every one of us that is a part of the body of Christ, we are suspended like that airplane between heaven and earth. We have a pull and a desire and a lift that we might go to heaven. But there are things that will pull us down. But we have to trust that God is the one that is flying the plane. Because if we try to do it, I guarantee you we will have about 20 seconds of good flying, and then we will be a big fireball on the ground. Every single one of us has forces pulling on us in some direction or another. Our heart desires to fly with God. St. Therese of Lisieux, if you've never read any of her works or her autobiography, I really recommend it. Or see the movie. It's really close to the book. And she talks about in one of her manuscripts that we are like little birds that desire to fly into the sun, and the sun represents God. But we have these little tiny wings and we can't do it. And God himself comes and scoops us up, and he flies us toward the sun. But at the same time, we get distracted by the worms and the mud on the ground. And we don't always look up to see Christ, who will take us to the heart and the love and the fire of our Heavenly Father. You see, we are suspended between heaven and earth. We have those forces, those desires. We also have things like sin and addiction and bad relationships and distractions in the world that will pull us back down again. And so we have to trust that Christ himself will bring us to whatever point we need to be in our lives. And that's what the gospel is about. See, all of us have to wait because God knows what he's doing. Folks, let me say that again. God knows what he's doing. And sometimes we want to rush into the airplane and we want to fly away and we want to be away from these places and we want to be with him and we want to take the stick. We have to trust that he knows what he's doing. And that he will call each and every one of us to himself when he knows we're ready. Not when we know we're ready. We live life on his terms, not on ours. Because again, I guarantee you, the second we begin to live life on our terms and not God's, we will be pulled down. We will never be able to keep and maintain our flight between heaven and earth without trusting that the pilot knows what he's doing. So what's working on us? What's working on us in this life? What's keeping us pulled toward the earth? Where we don't trust in God, where we try to take control of the airplane. And maybe this is the time in our life when we finally turn control over to him. And I guarantee the turbulence may continue, but we will be completely safe. I have to tell you a story of a young man that I had the opportunity to meet about 3 years ago. His name was Bobby. The reason I got to meet Bobby was that his mother called me up and said he's dying. He's 32 years old, dying of sarcoma. And I never really got to talk to him. I got to the hospital and I said, why didn't you call me sooner? And they said he wasn't ready until now. And I went in and I spoke with him and I gave him the last rites and he died. Lived 32 years of his life outside of the church. 32 years of his life he was grounded. 32 years of his life he struggled through this cancer and this struggle without the noticeable grace of God. And yet at the last moment, with the sacraments and the grace that is offered to each and every one of us sitting here, we were able to watch as Bobby crossed the threshold into heaven. And I began to think to myself, how does this happen? Why were we here? And he's like those people that come in at 5 o'clock at the last minute. It's because God knew he was ready then. He wasn't ready a day before, and he certainly would not have been ready the day after. And as I was at the funeral home the next day, I met his grandmother. His grandmother told me, she says, that his prayers answered and come true. She said, I lit a candle for that young man every single week of his life that he would come back to the church. And then I realized why I was there at that right moment, at that right time. It's because those prayers were answered. And she even told me, she said, I was starting to lose all kinds of hope. She was beginning to think that, she needed to do something, or she needed to push her grandson, or she needed to do something in a particular direction. God knew better than she did, and she eventually began to trust him again. And when at the end of that young man's life, he received the sacraments of grace, he entered into the heavenly kingdom as if he never left. See, God is in charge here. God is flying the plane. God knows how to get us home. But it is always a collaborative effort. It is always our part not only to help ourselves get to heaven, but you are guaranteed that you are obligated to get those people you're sitting beside to heaven as well. We have a calling and a vocation to work in the vineyard of the Lord. And he calls us to get those people we live with, the people we work with, the people we encounter, including ourselves. It's all part of the package deal. Just like flying an airplane is not just a pilot and a plane, but it is in fact the ground crew, the tower, the air traffic controller, the pilot, the mechanic. Everybody is involved in getting that plane safely to its destination. Likewise, every single one of us is called to be suspended between heaven and earth. We are on this journey together, and it is together that we walk through the gates of paradise. It is together that we work in the vineyard of the Lord. It is together that we fulfill our call and our vocation by baptism and that universal call to salvation that God calls each and every one of us to, that we might arrive safely at our homes.